At a time when this federal administration is already causing so much fear and harm in our communities, these threats are serious and consequential. But our same communities have told me loud and clear that silence in the face of oppression is not an option.
And tonight, 1,700 National Guard troops are now set to mobilize across 19 states over the coming weeks. They are going to help Homeland Security execute a sweeping federal crime and immigration crackdown that is underway now. The order is effective August through mid-November, Fox News is learning. And a U.S. defense official tells Jackie Heinrich and Liz Frieden the National Guard being mobilized will effectively serve as a support pillar.
So we just saw yet another long week of Democrats protesting on the behalf of criminals, whether that's the street gangs of DC or illegal aliens. It doesn't really matter, because I hope you're noticing a common pattern here, which is that their party will always take the side of not the ordinary law-abiding American citizens, but basically anyone who is antagonizing or terrorizing or causing problems for the normal American. These are, of course, the political constituents of the Democrat Party. But that in mind, I think there is hope, both when it comes to the massive crime problem within blue cities, as well as the sanctuary city issues that make it harder for us to get in there and remove public safety threats from the community. And that is the fact that, in a sense, the Democrats were for once maybe right about something, because the so-called authoritarian playbook that Trump is exercising in DC, and look, it's going to expand. He's going to bring it to other cities, you know? How dare he want to make other places across this country clean and safe and free of criminals and nice places to take your families. This is so horrible. Project 2025 warned us about this, right? Is indeed expanding, because we just saw the announcement here from Trump that he will indeed be deploying up to 1,700 National Guards into 19 different states to help DHS primarily with deportations, but the crime issues may also be embedded in that. And yes, in a sense, you could see this as an expansion of the DC playbook. And look, here's hoping. Here's hoping, actually, that not just one American city can be free of crime virtually overnight. Hopefully that comes to all American cities. But that said, in today's video, I want to go over this as well as show you some of the lowlights of Democrat mayors and governors trying to stand up and fight against the Trump administration this week, because you will again rapidly see here how pathetic it gets as they, as usual, right, take the side of violent criminals. So we'll tell you all about it. First, though, do us a favor as usual. If you enjoy our content, make sure you hit that like button down below and subscribe to the channel if you are new. Subscribing is not only the best way to support our videos, but it also ensures that you can stay up to date with all of the latest news and coverage. And with that in mind, I first of all want to kind of start this video by checking in on the federal takeover of DC to actually look at how it's doing. Because keep in mind, from 40,000 feet on the airwaves of MSNBC, excluding Joe Scarborough, you have been hearing the entire time that this is authoritarianism. He's sending the secret police. He's violating the sovereignty of DC, all these different things. But now in reality, right? And by the way, keep in mind, they also told you crime's not a problem in DC, and over-policing doesn't make anyone safer. That's what Simone Sanders told us. So remember that as well. We got the announcement here in DC this week that in the past week, there were indeed 0 murders now reported in DC. A historic accomplishment, and proving, by the way, that indeed crime is an option, right? We do not have to live with rampant crime and rampant issues and rampant just squalor and homelessness all across our cities. These things are indeed voluntary. Americans do not have to accept these things, but guess what? It takes very simple, the political will to actually want to stop it and not scream about, you know, not listen, I guess, to the screaming activists who claim you're overreaching or being authoritarian or racist for trying to provide a better life for all of these citizens of this country. So take a listen.
President Trump, would you like Congress to give you more control over DC when they return from recess?
Look, DC is a miracle what's happened. I mean, they can come up with fake numbers like the mayor's doing. Oh, no, it was going down for 20 years. You didn't live here. You know, have you been mugged? Okay. D.C. was a hellhole, and now it's safe. And in fact, I put out this morning, I said, I hate to say this because it doesn't sound very good, but there have been no murders in D.C. in the last week. That's the first time in anybody's memory that you haven't had a murder in a week. And I think the mayor has to get on the ball because we have a situation, and she's a nice woman, but I'll tell you what, she's got to get on the ball. We have, I don't want to see phony numbers. D.C. hit an all-time high last year of absolute total crime, and it continued pretty bad. And then we put some strength into it, got the numbers down a little bit, but we brought in the D.C. National Guard, and we coupled them with the police, and it has been amazing. I have friends that live here, people that work in the White House, but I have friends that live here. They're all going out to dinner now. They haven't gone out in years.
You know, isn't it just interesting how simple this issue really is? Because if you remember back to, say, 2020 and all of the 10-slide Instagram posts you were seeing on social media, and all these lectures from Cornell West and all these social scientists, political historians, Democrat activists about how over-policing is a problem. You know, Simone Sanders, of course, said on the clip we played a million times talking about D.C., we need to rethink what it means to be safe in America because more police doesn't make us safe. All of these crazy hoops about how, if we send social workers to deal with crimes, we could talk to them. Maybe they're just having all of the mental gymnastics and nonsense. The overthinking of this issue is being proven wrong right here. No, indeed. When you get tougher on crime, crime goes down. It's very basic. It's called an incentive structure, right? When there is more deterrence for crime, when there's less reason to do it, when people understand there's going to be serious consequences and they're not going to get away with it, guess what happens? Inevitably, you see less crime. Whereas on the flip side, all of these so-called ideas of criminal justice reform about how, if we loosen the penalties for petty crimes, then that'll give people an opportunity to turn their life around. And maybe they just made a simple mistake. Okay, in practice, how has that worked in New York City? In practice, how has deploying social workers to respond to 911 calls worked in Los Angeles? How has the idea not to prosecute teenagers because they should deserve a second chance, how's that been working out in DC? Just keep that in mind. What we're watching right now is the complete vindication of the very basic concept that, hey, incentive equals you're going to get more of it. So if you incentivize crime, you get more of it. If you incentivize law and order, you get more of it. The very basic right-wing, quote unquote, but it should be common sense logic, is completely beating the crap out of all of the stupid, like BLM era, nonsense, social science ideas about how to really rethink public safety and all this garbage, okay? We're right, they're wrong. That's the objective truth. And by the way, the same is exactly true here on immigration. I've said this a million times, by the way. When it comes to amnesty, when it comes to sanctuary city, all these other different ideas that the left runs about how it actually makes our places safer, it helps our economy. No, very straightforward here, guys. When you incentivize more illegal immigration, you get more of it and you get the problems that come with it. That in mind. Again, these issues are connected. I firmly believe they are, right? Crime and illegal immigration, because after all, illegal immigration is a crime. Well, earlier this week, we saw the Trump administration get into pretty notable battles with two different local Democratic governments, that being not just Massachusetts, but specifically the city of Boston, as well as the state of Washington, over their very aggressive sanctuary city and sanctuary state policies. Essentially here, Pam Bondi and the Department of Justice were threatening to withhold federal funding, and specifically withhold that funding if they insisted on continuing to harbor actual criminal illegal aliens currently sitting in their jails, keep this in mind, from ICE officials, right? The ludicrousness of this policy, by the way, not only is this person an illegal alien, which already warrants deportation, they went out and committed crimes and got arrested for those crimes. They're sitting in the jails, okay? So they're an active threat to the community. They're terrorizing people in the community. And cities like Boston essentially say, no, we're not going to inform ICE about this. We're going to keep them here And many times we're just going to release them back onto the street so that they continue to terrorize people. Same issue with Washington State. Now, that said, in response to the Trump administration now threatening these sanctuary regions, we saw some counterattack this week, right? They were holding press conferences, protesting, and well, as you can see here from Michelle Wu, who is the mayor of Boston, and her little event to protest against the Trump administration. And again, this is to try to stop ICE from being allowed to arrest illegal aliens, not just in the city, but in their jails. Here are the sights and sounds of that very protest. And, well, it really does tell you a lot, doesn't it? Take a listen.
Everybody, hoo-hoo-ya, hoo-hoo-ya. Evladi.
You know, I really can't imagine why the Democrat Party has an approval rating in the 20s. What a baffling mystery. I mean, as you can see, the resistance is clearly so strong and so inspiring and passionate. I was moved by that, you know? When she said, all of my preconceived biases and prejudices were removed, and I became a woke liberal activist in that moment alone. Yeah. Okay, in all seriousness, yeah, you basically get the idea. And this is the naivety just being weaponized and moved to say, hey, keep releasing violent criminals onto our streets because Trump is so bad. And, well, take a listen here to the actual justification of the mayor of Boston. And you basically get the idea here that no, Boston is saying we're going to keep on sheltering our illegals, which, as we'll show you in a second, there might actually be a good solution to this problem if these sanctuary cities and states want to continue to behave in this manner. But take a listen.
We're here again today because last week, Boston received a letter from the Attorney General of the United States on official letterhead from the federal government threatening to prosecute city officials and withhold federal funds unless we cooperate with carrying out mass deportations. At a time when this federal administration is already causing so much fear and harm in our communities, these threats are serious and consequential. But our same communities have told me, loud and clear, that silence in the face of oppression is not an option. The U.S. Attorney General asked for a response by today. So here it is. Here is our response. Stop attacking our cities to hide your administration's failures.
I mean, first of all, wow, isn't the energy just so off the charts? But in all seriousness, to me, that sounds like a fantastic idea. Actually, we should take legal action against city officials who are obstructing the enforcement of federal law. We should defund these places. And frankly, my only question to the Trump administration is why you have not done it. Why don't you get it done? They've been saying this for months, right? We're going to go after this. The Democrats say, that's authoritarian. They're threatening us. Okay. How about stop threatening them and actually do it? But anyways, as you'll see in a second, maybe there's an even better solution because if the judges are going to say, no, you can't withhold funding, all this stuff, maybe there's a workaround. It's called we federalize the cities by impromptu action. But anyways, the last thing I want to point out here before we move on to the announcement about the National Guard is a similar event that the Democrat governor of Washington, Bob Ferguson, held. in which he was taking questions from the press. And this is so very telling, and I want everyone to remember this, because this is the difference between the rhetoric on sanctuary state and city policies, where they say, oh no, we're keeping people safe, actually. You know, the same thing as BLM, right? You just don't understand. You're just narrow-minded. You don't actually see how, linking arms and singing Kumbaya actually makes us safer as a community. Whereas this reporter brings the governor the actual facts, the actual reality of what sanctuary city policies cause in the real world. And you can see the disconnect. It is so bad here for the Washington governor that he actively simply retreats from the question, because despite having this big grandstanding press conference, cannot actually defend his own policy because it is indeed that bad. This is an amazing clip. Check it out.
So you've used this phrase repeatedly, that we're not going to sacrifice our state's values. You know, we have several instances in this state. I see the chief of the patrol behind you. He just sat front row at sentencing while a man was sent to prison, an illegal alien who murdered a Washington State Patrol trooper because of our state's sanctuary policies. He could have been deported multiple times, run-ins with law enforcement, but our sanctuary policies shielded him. He went on to kill Trooper Christopher Gadd. How is that in line with our state's values?
Our job is to make sure we're adopting laws that make the appropriate balance, and to keep Washington Working Act, adopted in a bipartisan fashion, by the way, by the state legislature, I think strikes that right balance. If folks violate the law, engage in criminal conduct, they're going to be held accountable for that here in Washington state, and whether you're documented or undocumented. So I think those are consistent with the values of the Keep Washington Working Act, and we'll continue doing that.
A follow-up to the question I asked earlier, and you made the point, if somebody breaks the law, it doesn't matter if they're here illegally or they're citizens, we're going to arrest them, as was the case with the man who killed Trooper Gadd. But the point in the question was, he had had several run-ins with law enforcement in the years that he was living here illegally, where in a non-sanctuary state, they could have cooperated with ICE to remove him from the country. There's no doubt that Christopher Gadd would be alive today if it weren't for our state sanctuary policies. We also had the convicted child rapist who was just released from prison in Spokane out onto the streets, so ICE had to go track him down in the community rather than having an orderly and more safe transfer. So no one's saying, let's go round up people in the fields or whatever it is, but why not cooperate with the federal government and with ICE when it comes to known violent criminals who we could remove from our streets in the interest of public safety?
Yeah, appreciate it. I think I've answered that question. Any other questions that folks have?
No, you clearly didn't answer the question. And the reason you didn't is because you can't. Because you can have a talking point about what sanctuary policies do. They're not that radical. We're just saying we won't cooperate with federal law enforcement in conducting their raid. It doesn't mean that we're a lawless anarchy state. It doesn't mean that illegal alien criminals won't face the consequences of the law over all this stuff, right? Everything is fine. Stop letting right-wing propaganda make our places seem so crazy. And then what's the reality? As I brought up before, this is the same issue in both Washington and Boston. If an illegal alien commits a crime, it can be a pretty serious crime. It can be a carjacking, it can be a robbery, it can be an assault, many of these things. And again, if they're an illegal, in my opinion, if they end up in the jail for any reason, they're illegal, more than enough reason, get the ICE detainer, get them out of the country. They won't do that, right? Because they say, criminal justice reform, we need to be amazing, even and nice and compassionate, even though he's illegal. And by the way, if you were illegally in a country to begin with, I would never do that, but I'm just going to say hypothetically, if I knew I was illegally in a country, visa overstay, whatever, I would do my best to stay out of the trouble of the law. And frankly, if I did get caught by the law, I wouldn't be complaining that I got deported for whatever reason. That includes even things like getting stopped for speeding, right? You're illegally in the country. Shouldn't have to matter whether you even get convicted. The fact that you're causing enough trouble where there's any attention you give them any reason, you're illegal. They can deport you anyway. Anyways, the point is this, right? So they're sitting there in the jail, and common sense says, okay, they should be deported. But guess what is happening? Again, the reality, despite his lying and gaslighting, is not only do they not tell ICE, hey, we have an illegal alien in our jail, They let the illegal alien out because no bail, no cash bail, all this nonsense. And as you saw here, there's a clear instance where this illegal then proceeded to kill a state trooper, a law enforcement officer in Washington. The entire thing was completely preventable because he had several different law enforcement run-ins in the past. But guess what? Guess what shielded him? Specifically, the sanctuary city and sanctuary state policies of Washington. Okay, it really is indeed that simple. And I already answered the question. No, you didn't. And no Democrat can do this. Because again, this is the reality. When they say, oh, we're just not going to cooperate with ICE, it doesn't mean we don't want to enforce the law or something. Okay. But largely speaking, I mean, you can be like Florida, yes, and help ICE do raids, but generally ICE doesn't really need the help in terms of conducting immigration raids. What would really work out well, right, is if local police departments are giving the information over to ICE of, by the way, the most dangerous illegals, the ones committing crimes, who is committing the crimes. It is sanctuary policies that are shielding that information and not allowing it to be handed over to the federal government. Frankly, it ought to be illegal. I don't know. Maybe the federal government should have access to this database anyway. But all of that in mind, so you hear the constant meltdown nationwide about how Trump is overreaching. He's going to use the DC playbook. You currently see, the sanctuary states and cities fighting tooth and nail to stand down. We're not going to allow Trump to defund us. We're going to fight till the end. We're going to keep protecting our criminals. Well, that said, I think we might have found the solution, okay? The blueprint, as they're calling it. Because just over the weekend, we got the news that up to 1,700 National Guard troops will now be deploying in 19 states to help DHS with not just a crime crackdown, but specifically this is supposed to be an illegal immigration crackdown. Take a listen to those details for yourself.
And Pentagon officials are confirming to Fox News 1,700 National Guard troops are set to mobilize in 19 states in the coming weeks as the president continues his crackdown on crime and illegal immigration. Let's go to Lucas Tomlinson. He's live at the White House for us. Lucas.
Good afternoon, John. And the Pentagon says those National Guard troops will be helping process and help deport illegal aliens. And here in the nation's capital, there's over 2,000 National Guardsmen patrolling the streets. And one Republican congressman says this city, the nation's capital, needs cleaning up.
Even with D.C. hooking the books on their crime statistics, you're 3.5 times more likely to be killed in D.C. than you were in 2012 when a serious crime is committed. And from 2018 to 2023, carjackings are up 550%. So things are out of control.
And President Trump says he might deploy the National Guard to other big cities pretty soon.
We're going to make our cities very, very safe. Chicago's a mess. You have an incompetent mayor, grossly incompetent. And we'll straighten that one out probably next. So I think Chicago will be our next, and then we'll help with New York.
Now, last year, John, the murder rate here in D.C. was on par with Chicago and nearly 4 times higher than Los Angeles and nearly 6 times higher than where you are in New York.
Well, hey, there you go. Here's hoping it frankly goes to almost, if not all, of the 50 states. Now, it's worth noting that these operations are reportedly set to start in mainly, not exclusively, but mainly red states, right? As you can see here, the map in red are the states they're supposed to be sent to. So most of these places do have Republican governors, except for New Mexico. I'm not sure what the disparity is there, but I'd assume it's because, well, largely the governors have to approve actually deploying National Guard to their places. Now, as you saw in California, there are ways to get around that, but, for now, whatever. We start here, as Trump is saying, he wants to expand it as well to the Democrat states. This is, again, the blueprint. And by the way, there are plenty of areas in red states that are both illegal immigration hotspots, especially these agricultural states up in like the sort of Midwest. Texas, obviously a border state. New Mexico, it goes without saying. And by the way, Joe Biden flew these people to all around the country. So every state needs a massive crackdown in deportation enforcement. And hey, if that can also serve as a deterrence for crime, because you're kind of seeing, right, the reason I'm combining these two issues in this video is because the efforts to curb and fight against them are being combined. As a matter of fact, you saw cases this week where some of the traffic stops actually resulted in deportations as well in DC because, hey, look, the operations, again, are going here hand in hand. So this is a good start, but it's obviously not enough, right? We need to see the National Guard deploy to all of these places. And by the way, if it requires an act of Congress because the judges try to tell you that, hey, under current law, you need the governor's permission or whatever. Okay, in that case, tell Mike Johnson, tell John Thune, we need to pass laws that give the federal government unilateral authority to do whatever it needs to do to enforce immigration law, number one. But number two, I'd also like to say on this DC crime issue, while they're at it, that I don't think deploying feds to a city for a month is going to be enough. I think we need another national crime bill. Maybe that's a hot take, because some people are still in this mindset from the 2020 campaign, which I frankly think one of the biggest mistakes that a Trump campaign, any of the 3 times ever made, was this whole talking point that back then that, oh, Joe Biden was racist because back in 1992, he sponsored the crime bill. And as I said, no, I think the opposite. I think right now America needs another 2025 crime bill. Why do I say that? Because first of all, I think it was utterly tone deaf for the right wing back then to be arguing. As you saw these people burning down our cities, as you saw the beginning of the criminals, now what we've seen for the past 4 to 5 years, taking over the streets, for us to argue that, oh, our opposition was too tough on crime, we ought to be softer. So hopefully we've rectified that mistake now and can fully recognize that, first of all, the issue back then, frankly, was not that, oh, Joe Biden and Bill Clinton and the Democrats were racist. No, the anti-crime policies back then passed with bipartisan support. The difference is the Democrats used to have sanity in the 1990s. Now they've become completely insane. But no, it is indeed correct, as you're seeing now. Being tough on crime does indeed work. We need that attitude back in America. We need it back in our cities. We need it back in terms of federal legislation. The 90s crime bills combined with Giuliani and all these sort of like tough on crime mayors, look at any chart, right? You saw huge spikes in crime in the late 80s and 1990s. Then it came plummeting down the hill. Why is that? Because again, this stuff is very simple. When you get tough, when you create less incentives for things, when you make the punishments for certain crimes more severe, you're going to get less of it. Now, that said, is the crack cocaine thing really driving a lot of the violence maybe today? No, and maybe that's somewhere where the 92 crime bill differs from what we want today. But I would objectively say, you know what we need today? We need a national crime bill that makes it very serious, right? The punishment's very strict for things like theft, right? Because I think that's the core of a lot of what you see now, right? Carjacking, smash and grabs. These are usually like the petty crimes that lead to more serious ones. Okay. How about this? 10, 20 years in prison for, that type of armed robbery or whatever it is, okay? And, no age restriction on that, right? We're not going to allow some teenager to get away with a violent carjacking. No, you're going to be tried as an adult, right? Even something like, because you keep seeing this issue of repeat offenders keep ending up in the jails, and then soft on crime BLM policies are letting them out. Here's another idea you can borrow from Democrats back when they had a brain. How about the 3 strikes law? Kamala Harris was actually extremely controversial for supporting this back in the day, and then look what happened to her ever since. Completely surrendered to the woke, completely surrendered to BLM. No, I look at it like, okay, if you commit 3 different felonies on 3 different occasions, right? 3 different court dates throughout the year, you just keep coming back for a felon. Yeah, you should go to jail for life. Yeah, why do we keep giving you more chances? No, we are tired of this collectively as a country. We need to get tougher on it. I understand the arguments about over-policing or police state, but frankly, okay, the way I see it, you do not have a free country now, because any country where you don't have safety, where you're, being attacked constantly by the criminals, that's no place for a free society to thrive. And, all of that in mind, I think not only do I support right now what this administration is doing, I think we need to see more, and we need to see acts from Congress against this stuff. Now that DC has sort of made crime a national issue and a national issue of debate, we need to take full political advantage of that and federalize this issue as a whole. So there you have it. All right, that said, guys, let me know your thoughts on all of this in the comment section down below. Be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you are new, and until next time, God bless and peace.